and Operation Car Wash scandals in some way, bringing down all of the past three presidents. Not always while they're in office, but still, it had a pretty big and lasting effect on their presidencies, even after they left office, and really a stain on Peru's opinion of their leaders, something that they will work hard to have to get back and restore their faith in government. As you could probably imagine, the Peruvians were not the only ones with some serious lack of faith in their democracy, because as this investigation played out, there was some serious defects on domestic politics as well. The treasurer of the Workers' Party, João Vacari Neto, was arrested for receiving, quote, irregular donations. The former chief of staff of President Lula, Jose Dirceu, was arrested for orchestrating a large part of the scandal. The president of the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of the Congress of Brazil, Eduardo Cunha, was investigated for receiving more than $40 million U.S. money in kickbacks and bribes. And the former president and senator of Fernando Collor de Mello of the Christian Conservative Christian Labor Party, or PTC, was charged with corruption as well. And obviously we already know, in mid-April of 2018, former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, after being condemned for passive corruption and money laundering in relation to a luxury apartment in Guajara, received from an OAS construction company, entered prison in Curitiba to serve the sentence of 12 years and 1 month of imprisonment. On July 3rd, 2018, failed Brazilian billionaire Ike Batista was convicted of bribing disgraced former Rio de Janeiro Governor Sergio Cabral for state government contracts, having paid Cabral U.S. dollars worth $16.6 million, and was sentenced to a 30-year imprisonment as well. So this incredibly off-the-charts levels of corruption and as well a pretty high level of crime paved the way for the rise of Jair Bolsonaro, who, as we have talked about on this network many times before, idolizes military dictatorships, has said pretty awful things about gay people, black people, women. He is now obviously president of Brazil, considering getting rid of these, probably one of the biggest things most essential to human survival that happens to be in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest. And meanwhile, all his opposition has pretty much been taken out by these prosecutors, these people in this Curitiba task force who are pretty much running the show. They have been very widely respected over the past 4 or 5 odd years, as they have been making arrests and really exposing quite a lot about the awful side, the awful underbelly that's really turned into the full light of day now, the corruption and just the awful, awful nature of business in Brazilian politics. That's all been exposed now, thanks to these people. But up until this point, we've heard obviously a lot about the people who have done the crimes, how the crimes have been done, all that stuff. But what about the people who have been fighting these crimes, the people who have been doing these major high-profile arrests that are so incredibly popular with the Brazilian people? The thing is, these people over time have risen to almost hero-like status with the Brazilian people because they are the ones who are out there really stopping that corruption. And Brazil has been obviously a pretty corrupt place, and these people have been seen as some of the biggest and most prominent fighters in corruption, the symbols of integrity, the symbols of an institution, like the last institution really in Brazil, that still has any faith left with the public. So why not learn a little bit more about them? Starting with the judge, Sergio Moro. He is the presiding judge. He is not a big-time judge. He's not a judge who is well-known. He's not a judge who's really close to the Supreme Court, kind of on what would be kind of considered a lower appeals court in America. But he is, very importantly, from that region, from the Curitiba region that has such a role to play. It's the home of where the task force is set up, and it's the place kind of where all the people, we already talked about Delton Dallagnol, who is the leader of the task force. It's where they go to kind of report and convict people who they want to charge in their investigation. He is the guy. He is known, Sergio Moro is the judge, is known as someone who is very good at his job, very succinct, very precise, very quick at getting out these legal opinions that are almost very rarely, almost never overturned in the high courts. And he's considered as someone who is not a slacker. He's considered as one of the most efficient, hardworking guys in the Brazilian judiciary, which is a pretty high compliment, and kind of made him the perfect man to lead this big, important for the country corruption investigation. Take a look at this glowing news clip from the Financial Times about how he was the one ending 5 centuries of corruption in Brazil.
Sergio Moro is the disruptor of the Brazilian judicial system. He's the man who's ended 5 centuries of impunity in Brazil, Latin America's largest country. 4 years ago, when he started Operation Car Wash, the investigation into Petrobras, he suddenly started arresting very important people, something that never happened in Brazil before. Culminating last month, former President Lula, Brazil's most popular politician. For Brazilians, Sergio Moro, he's someone who has finally started to deal with corruption.
Deltan Dallagnol, as we also mentioned, has been a huge figure of immense popularity, described in an NPR article, an interview on Morning Edition, as the newest Brazilian hero, not a soccer star, but the prosecutor pressing the corruption case against the country's political elites. A literal line sneaking across the block from the bookstore in Brazil, where he recently wrote a book to kind of give his many fans a little bit of a detail about his work as leading this task force. And an NPR reporter even describes him as, quote, posing for selfies with fans who give him hugs and handshakes. Dallagnol is not a famous writer or showbiz celebrity, but a federal attorney. This crowd considers him a hero because he's a lead prosecutor in an investigation that exposed a massive web of corruption known as Jato, or car wash. The investigations led to the imprisonment of some of Brazil's, obviously, as you know this probably by now, Brazil's most powerful politicians and businessmen. Presidents, cabinet ministers, senators, and corporate executives are in its crosshairs. Yeah, so, I mean, some people are describing it as exactly the meaning of hope. You know, people are holding on to this opportunity as the hope of a new beginning in Brazil. I mean, it's a pretty big thing for people. A Brazilian by the name of Rodrigo Prado in this NPR interview says, what I think has really changed the myth of the friendly, laid-back Brazilian has fallen down. People are angry, and all angry with Michel Temer, obviously Dilma Rousseff before that, and now they've turned to a pretty far-right guy, as we mentioned before, Jair Bolsonaro, who threatens, his administration threatens, I mean, journalists, Afro-Brazilians, marginalized communities there, homosexuals, gay people, LGBTQ plus community people, like they are all not in a good place. And that is all because of the fact of this corruption, the fact that it's built and it's been exposed by these people who have been elevated to almost hero status. And by the way, especially in the case of Dallagnol with this book, they've made a lot of money off of this, and they've been a profit. Their names have been out there. Maybe they haven't asked for it, but it's just kind of the reality of the situation when you're doing such important work. But the thing is, our series is not over. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, we go deeper into the prosecutorial team and what happens when the anti-corruption crusaders become the ones being accused of corruption. That's tomorrow on our special series of Newsflash episodes going inside Operation Car Wash.